And we are recording. Hello, Sabina. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Doing very well, considering all that's going on. Thank you so much for asking
Yeah.
me.
You
How
know,
are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I like to say I'm a little bit bored. I'm feeling a little claustrophobic. I try to get out as much as possible, but I'm really happy that you're on the show today. Dr. Sabina, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind trying to get you on here today to talk about so many different things, so many amazing things. We're going to talk about brain allergies. We're going to talk maybe about depression, multiple chemical sensitivities, and all that. But before we get started, can you just give a little bit about your background to the listeners right now?
Well, just briefly, I started in education as a teacher, and it was during that time that I developed severe allergies, and it was quite interesting because I was going the traditional route of getting tested and allergy shots and all of that, and I was actually getting worse.
Wow.
And the doctors couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out, and that actually really did, I would say, initiate my searching another way. And that's what led me down the road to naturopathy, and starting to search. Do they have answers for me? And and obviously they did. And what I learned was I had that, and that was my first phase. I was still a teacher, so it was during that time that I left teaching, because of my sensitivities, and I decided to go back to university. And that's when I did my doctorate in the area of brain allergies,
Okay.
in the area of psychology. And I decided that if I was experiencing these reactions to the environment and to foods, what about other people? I'm sure I'm not the only one, right?
Exactly.
And that led me to my doctoral work. And as a result, I went into private practice afterwards, and also then initiated a school and started teaching my own type of what I would say course material, and continue to study and open up into other areas of energy medicine.
Yeah. I mean, fantastic. I love energy medicine. It is really it's the new frontier. And I think once it becomes more mainstream and really, it's going to take off because it makes, on an intellectual level, it just makes sense. Like once you do the research and understanding, what we are and who we are as human beings and how the body works, it makes a huge difference on that. So with the brain allergies, what made you focus exactly on the brain? Because I mean, that's a very, very specific area in the body, because usually when you have an allergic reaction, it's kind of a systemic thing. It's all over the body. You're either getting rashes and things happening. What made you focus on the brain itself?
Well, it was through my own personal experience. I
Okay.
would have an exposure, and it took me a while to figure it out, but I would have, I'd say, an exposure, or I ate something which was much more specific and very clear. And what I experienced right afterwards was a brain reaction, something like I would cry, like I would eat
Okay.
something, and one of them was popcorn or corn. And I know why, because of what they do to corn. And corn is a typical one for many people. I would
Yeah, I
say it's
hear
number.
that.
Hmm?
I hear that now.
Yes, well, because of the atrazine, which is the pesticide and fungicide that's used in the fields, on the fields, that is absorbed, of course, into the plant material, and we're taking that in. So I did not know any of this. All I knew is that when I had corn or popcorn, it was a matter of 10 minutes later, I would just be crying. And I would be like talking like we are now, smiling. And then all of a sudden, I just felt so overcome with sadness. And if I had kept that pattern, of course, I would have classified myself as suffering from depression.
Yeah.
Right? So that was very clear cut, and that continued with other foods that I recognized. I also saw the correlation with specific types of contaminants, exposures. Chlorine was another one, which was very difficult because we have
Oh,
chlorine in
yeah.
our water. So
Yeah.
stepping out of a shower was dramatic for me. And this, of course, I discovered over a period of months. And I decided to do more research in the area of what is really going on with me, I'm in the area of psychology, so what's happening?
Yeah.
When I eat this food, this happens to my brain. And so I went down that path, Michael, and I discovered through a different way of being tested that I had a whole host of, I would say, allergens, but mainly to uh, pollutants and preservatives in our food.
Wow. That's, yeah, it's so amazing now to hear that, because we're just so bombarded by chemicals these days, and everything. And I mean, we're so complicit in it too as well, because we don't realize what we're buying and what we're eating at the same time too. Was there a certain pathology within the brain allergies that you were looking for, that it was just coming up? I mean, it seems like it was like very much an emotional reaction to the chemicals or whatever the allergens that were in the body. So was it basically working on the hormone level that you noticed first, and then triggering the emotions of that, and then it affecting the brain, or
Well,
how did
it
that work?
becomes quite, thank you. That's a great question. It does become quite complex, and I was really fascinated with that as well. And so what I discovered in my research was that I was not experiencing the typical histamine reaction, which is the sort of the inflammatory reaction, but it was in a different form. It was called the kinin type. That's just the sort of the chemical name given to it, that specifically impacts the brain. And what I mean
Okay.
by that, it's not only that it would change in the way I felt, but it could also, and it did, my focus, concentration, my ability to remember. Memory was a big one.
Wow.
All of a sudden, it was like, what's my second name? And I was just went blank.
Wow, that's severe, eh?
That's severe.
Wow.
That's severe. And I like, I'm a young person, right? So it's like, wait a minute. And so it really was quite devastating to experience just the sort of the full gamut of what brain reactions can occur.
Mhm.
And that was a concentration was another one. All of a sudden, and I love to read. I love doing research, but I couldn't. It was, I just, again, I couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus. So these are other ways that it does impact the brain. Of course, through my research, I discovered that we have, again, a full gamut of symptoms. Schizophrenia is another one.
Yeah, that's really
Catatonia,
interesting. Wow.
to that extent. And I helped people with those types of conditions. To fatigue. Fatigue was another one that I experienced. Tiredness, narcolepsy. I would be driving and be exposed to, say, a truck passing by, and I'm inhaling extra fumes, and all of a sudden, I just
Ugh.
wanted to sleep. I had to, on a number of occasions, drive to the side of the road and literally close my eyes.
That's that is that's extreme. But you know what? It may seem very uncommon, but I think it's more common than most people think. And
Correct, it is.
it is, and it's something that's, it's, I don't mean to really scare people, but I just think if you really start to be aware of what's happening, and of lately now, I've been a little more aware, because I was kind of trying to do my research with this, and I was like, ah, damn. I look underneath my sink, and it's like, what am I doing? Like, look at all the crap that I have. And you know what it is? It's like, because let's say, for example, like a cleaner, right? You think it's harmless, and like your mother used it, your grandmother used it, right? So you just naturally think you're going to use it. But then I was just kind of doing some research, and I'm going, why am I putting this on my counter and in my sinks and everything else? Because that's what it is, but it can cause me more harm. Because it kind of got me freaked out a bit when I was kind of, doing my research about your background too. And it's like, I have that. I have that once in a while. Is it that? And I do have allergies too as well. I've had severe allergies as a kid. And my brain was, the first thing they always do, like you said, is they give the injection, right? And I was on injections for a longest time. And, I still wasn't any better. Even now I'm in my 50s, I still have allergic problems. And now my brain was kind of going, maybe there's a correlation to this.
You're right on. Congratulations. Michael, that you have done that, because that's exactly what does happen. And it worsens because you become literally the toxic dump.
Yeah.
It accumulates. We call it bioaccumulation in the body. And so what that means is that over a period of time, you're not just 60% toxic, you're now 80% and then 90%, and then you crash. I mean, hopefully not, because you're learning about this. But that happens to so many people. And they have no idea that they're just full of heavy metals. They're full of these pollutants, contaminants in their body, that they have a lot of different types of allergies due to the pesticides, herbicides, the additives, the preservatives. You know, coming back to cleaning products, I'm actually doing another presentation just on that. Because
Wow.
in the kitchen alone, the amount of exposure is astronomical.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. Like, I'm actually embarrassed to go like underneath my sink right now, just to kind of just in my head, and especially now because we're so hyper aware of cleaning and disinfecting. And I mean, I have a background in culinary, so it was grained into my head about, we use bleach all the time. Bleach was our best friend, like cleaning all the time. Like, it's amazing how much chlorine and bleach, like scrubbing down the surfaces, like I mean, it's indoctrinated in our head. First thing when we go to culinary school is about, disinfecting, cleaning, and proper hygiene, and, the pathology of all the toxins and things like that, salmonella. It's just ingrained in your head, right? So it's amazing how much chlorine we use in the industry, but also too, is like, I look back in my childhood too. Well, I didn't say my childhood, but my teens. I worked in a grocery store, a small one, and they had a butcher shop, so a regular, real butcher shop back in the days. And I remember seeing the butcher put bleach in the chicken to whiten it. I didn't know what he was doing. They had a big sink, put the chicken in, because normally with chicken, when you get it, when it's real fresh, it's a yellow tinge to it. Like the skin is yellow, but it's not appealing to people because they're so used to seeing white. So what do? They add a couple of drops of bleach in it. And I was like, why are you adding bleach to that? And my brain thinking like, oh, he's killing bacteria, but that's what it was. So like my brain goes, it happens all the time. So now when I go to the grocery store, it's like, and especially now, because now I'm more hyper aware of it now. I'm like, I really want to buy that chicken. And then now that I have the chicken, I'll take the skin off because I know it's bleached.
Wow, that is so shocking.
Yeah.
That is so shocking. Uh, well, I guess that's one of the reasons why, of course, I do highly recommend organic foods today, but also, of course, I have a whole series of books. And one of them is called Vibrational Cleaning, and another one actually, and I didn't talk about that as far as part of my bio, but I did actually become an author of 7 to 8 books. And 2 of them have to do with cleaning products and what to use instead. And that's why I did get involved with essential oils, because it's phenomenal
Yeah.
how they can be used. And my other book, of course, has to do with kitchen hygiene. And again, the amount of toxins that people are exposed to just in the kitchen. And you're eating the food, no wonder there are more food allergies, right?
Yeah.
So it was quite a learning curve for me. And as a result, I have been able to help truly thousands of people. Not just even in my clinic practice, but all over the world through my lectures and now
Yeah.
through my books. Because again, just like you pointed out, Michael, the amount of just using dish soap.
Yep.
Okay, read what's on that label. Do you know that you never get the soap off your dishes?
Yep.
There's a residue, and you are actually eating off of that plate, and you are now what? Ingesting some of that dish soap.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling because I actually changed my dish soap a long time ago. I actually have a chiropractor who does muscle testing, and because I was having all these problems, and it's bring in your chemicals and what you have and use. And first thing I muscle tested was really weak on was the dish soap that I was using. So that was a big switch. So that being said, I always like to have like very specific. Is there a specific dirty dozen, that we can look out for that, if people are listening to this podcast, they can go underneath their sink or maybe into the bathroom and figure out, okay, these are the dirty dozen. Okay, we should really avoid these ones right here. And if it's just like cleaning, but also maybe in the food, like maybe if there's a few that you can just say, okay, make sure when you read the label, make sure it doesn't have this in it.
Well, one rule that I certainly teach is if you cannot pronounce it and it looks really odd, then put it back on the shelf, because most often it's a chemical compound. Now, sometimes it can be a vitamin, but it's very rare that you will see that. Okay.
Yeah.
Especially in the cleaning aisles of say, a supermarket. So if certainly I avoid even walking down those aisles because of the smell just coming off the shelf, just the off-gassing
Yeah.
itself. I start sneezing. Sometimes my eyes will get a little bit irritated, but it's just mind-boggling that that is even allowed. Because they're so toxic.
Yeah.
Do you
Okay.
know, Michael, that since 1965, there have been over 4 million chemicals dumped into our environment from all various sources, from the air, water, cleaning products, etc.
I mean, I was going to ask you a question similar to that, but I'm glad you brought that up because can you just say those numbers again? Just so we can really emphasize that right now.
Yes, well, since 1965, there is now an overproduction of chemicals, and it's up to 4 million that
Wow.
are produced in all different facets, from the building industry and the cosmetic industry and the cleaning products and in the foods, the preservatives, the fertilizers, all of that.
Yeah, it's really scary, and you know it really is. It's from my understanding, a lot of it just comes from the petrochemical companies, because a lot of the derivatives are from that.
Yes,
Which I
absolutely.
which I found out was shocking because I had a naturopathic doctor on, and she creates her own supplement lines, and she was telling me that, do you know that a lot of that vitamin C is, the precursors are coming from the petrochemical companies? And my brain goes, you got to be kidding me. And she goes, no. And I was like, it's baffling, but we're so complacent in it. That's the thing. I think we just get so used to, it's like, whatever. Yeah, it's a cleaning product. It's so easy. It's like, why would I bother? We kind of just get so used to having that. But once you start waking up to it and realizing, yeah, okay,
Taking
maybe,
ownership. Well, part of the, Michael, I think with what has happened is that there has been a tremendous, I would say, reliance is probably the best word,
yeah,
of thinking that the government and the government standards and the ministry, therefore, they're going to make really great decisions for the people. Let me inform you, and certainly all the people listening, that is not the case.
yeah,
It is really the corporation that has their hand in this, and they want to sell products,
yeah.
and they want to sell it cheaply and make the most out of it. And I'm just going to say it like it is,
Yeah,
because it was a hard learning for me. And what it comes down to is becoming educated. And hence, this needs to be taught really in schools,
yeah,
right from kindergarten up. What are you eating? What are you being exposed to? What are you putting on your body? All of that. The air we breathe. We have all this climate concerns that the government all of a sudden has woken up to. That's not the issue. The issue is right inside your home. Do you know that you actually have more toxins in your home than outside your home?
oh, I believe that,
It's
sure.
it's 5 times more toxic. This is by the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. It is 5 times more toxic, your indoor air, than what's outside your home.
Yeah. So what are the main culprits that we can look for? If we just get back on that, what are some of the main culprits that we can look
Well,
for?
one of them that stands out, of course, is triglycan.
Okay, so what is that?
Now, triglycan is used as an antibacterial.
Okay.
Okay, and it's used in a lot of detergents. It's used in a lot of your sanitizers, and that I just shudder because I use a natural source one. Again, coming back to the use of essential oils, and it is a Canadian approved health sanitizer. But when I just shudder, I can smell it the alcohol, which is so intense, but it's also what's been used in the other chemical compounds. Triclosan was supposed to have been removed. It never was in Canada. It still is used. It is one of the culprits for actually causing bacterial problems. It actually works the other way when it's absorbed into the skin. Matter of fact, it's a contributing factor to what's called skin or flesh eating disorder, MRSA.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that? But it is really a very toxic compound, and it's used in a lot of dish soaps.
Wow. Yeah, I've actually seen that. It's actually, they'll actually advertise that. It's seen like, you'll see certain products will say, antibacterial, but then if you look at it, they'll actually advertise it as a product. That's the main ingredient. So, okay,
It
so
is.
that's one. What is another one we can look out for?
Phtalates.
Okay.
I say it as phthalates or fiddlets because of the pH.
I'm glad you said it because I'd have a hard time saying that.
But it is referred to as phthalates, but it is PHTHALATE. And that is more of a plasticizer compound. And that is, again, used in underarm deodorants. It's used in all different types of cosmetics. It's, again, used in many different household cleaning products. Very common, and very toxic. It's also a carcinogen.
Okay.
So also, obviously one to be avoided. Another one that's very common, and matter of fact, statistically, they have found that this was done, a research that was done with Americans in North America, that 9 out of 10 people have this in their bodies, in their tissues. And
That's
it's
crazy.
BPA, which is bisphenol A, of course, used in plastic again. This is your plasticizer. I mean, that's horrendous because, again, that comes back to it's a carcinogen. We are not really investigating or talking enough about how to avoid the cancers and the allergies.
Yeah.
And these are coming in from these compounds.
Yeah, and it's very interesting you brought that up because my next guest coming on, we're going to be talking exactly about cancer and all the different things on that. So it's a nice little segue into this too as well. So it's amazing.
It is. It truly is. It's
It's very
again, to
sad. It's
me,
sad at the same time too, like, I mean, how do we get this far? Like, I mean, as a society, we always want health. We want, vitality and health. And we get complicit in the whole idea that, we'll just kind of use the chemicals and we'll just use them. I just think alone, if we could just get rid of, like, let's say, I'm being realistic here. Let's say we get 10% of the crap out of there, even 10%. Again,
makes a
that's
difference.
it makes a huge difference, even on the body itself.
And
Let's think of,
one that you mentioned earlier, I agree with you with what you just said there. One that's very common, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, is chlorine.
yeah, please do.
Because, of course, that Javix. Matter of fact, with my clients and in my teaching, one of the first, I would say, my question to many of my clients, what do you use to whiten your clothes? And what do you think is the answer?
Chlorine, bleach.
Javix, a bleach, or
Yeah.
whatever. And I say bye-bye to it.
Yeah.
It is an extremely toxic substance. It is a carcinogen. It is a respiratory irritant.
Yeah,
And
that's for sure.
yes, and it is also a skin irritant and can cause any type of eczema, dermatitis, a whole range of skin disorders. Just to give you a little story, I had a client who had bought my book, and she was so impressed with it, she thought she would share it. She did share it with her daughter, who had a 5 or 6-year-old at the time, suffering with a very severe skin disorder. Very severe. And she couldn't figure it out. They had been using different types of drugs and creams. Doctor couldn't figure it out. It wasn't getting better. If anything, anytime the cream was applied, and these were open sores all over this child's body.
Oh, that's just so wrong.
So when she read my book, she recognized something that I was talking about in the book, and this comes back to the chlorine issue.
Okay.
Because I stress, get rid of it. Get it out of your house. Well, what she recognized when she read this particular chapter was she put the two together. She says, oh my gosh, I wash my children's clothes with chlorine. I
Wow.
soak it in chlorine, thinking I'm disinfecting. What she also recognized was what I say in the book, that there's a residue left in the material. And when the child or anyone wears that outfit that has been washed or soaked in Javex, you are absorbing it through your skin.
Okay.
So what was happening to this child who became extra hypersensitive, he was reacting to the chlorine that was in his clothes.
Wow.
Now, what she did was quite dramatic. She stopped using it. She went to a completely, which is what I recommend in the book, a completely different way to do it. What she noticed, oh, this was the other discovery. The cream that she was using for these open sores,
I can only imagine what's in that.
it had a chlorine base.
I don't mean to
No
laugh
wonder
about it,
the
but
child, I mean, it's so outrageous, isn't it? No
it
wonder
is.
the child would scream every time she applied the cream.
Wow.
You know, and I'm telling the story because I think it's important for a lot of people listening, how much this can make a difference in everyone's life. And in this particular case, that child sores began to heal within a week.
That's fantastic.
Okay, she was, I mean, the mother, she got back to me. She called me. She says, "You have no idea how much your book has done
Yeah.
for us as a family."
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's the power of information. And that's part of why I do this podcast. And partly why I was so excited when Dr. Landa suggested you come on, like, is like, this is a very powerful information. It's these small little, you know, bits and pieces that you can put together and starts to add up and you go, oh my God, that makes totally sense. Why wouldn't I think about that? And then all of a sudden you're just removing chemicals. You're not like you're doing anything crazy. You're just getting the chemicals out. And all of a sudden your natural body knows what to do. It goes, oh my God, this feels so good. There's no chemicals. Let's heal. Let's heal. So that being said, now at your
That's so
at your
true.
at your clinic, stuff like that, how do you test for multiple chemical sensitivities? Do you do blood panels? Do you have a
No, thank you for that. You mentioned muscle testing earlier.
yep,
I became, of course, I teach it today, muscle testing and various forms of kinesiology, applied kinesiology. So what I developed back in the early days, I had to find ways, very quick ways for myself. So that's why I learned how to do what we call applied kinesiology or muscle testing. And so I did learn that for myself, and then of course continued to teach it and used it in my practice. I also do what's called Egyptian dowsing. And so by both using both systems, I'm able to delineate very quickly, very quickly, what agrees and what doesn't. And my clients, they see it for themselves. They see it immediately. You know, muscle cannot hold. I do another technique called leg length, whereby the legs will actually shorten. One leg will shorten. I'll just put a vial, or I'll even put a sample, very
okay,
small. Sometimes I'll even have just the person think of that particular substance, or say dish soap or whatever it is, and the body reacts.
yeah,
The body knows best.
it certainly does. It's amazing what our bodies can do. It never ceases to amaze me all the time.
Now,
So
there's another technique that I do use or add to this, and
yeah,
that is I use what's called this, I just have a brochure on it, but I do use what's called BioWell, or basically it's a Kirlian bioelectrography photography.
yeah,
And I do this with my clients right away. And the reason I do is it allows me to see where there is a disruption in their energy field. We can see the gaps, the holes, and we can also address the areas that are impacting the energy centers called chakras.
Yeah.
So I can see it immediately. So can my clients,
Yeah.
because I like to educate them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important things is to educate, because I think, you know, when we go to a regular physician, it's just basically, what's the problem? Okay, here it is, but we really don't get educated on that. So spending that time with your clients, and I think we're going to do a whole episode just on, you know, GVD and Clearian photography and aura photography, because as everybody's been listening, you know, I'm a Reiki guy, so
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, so I'm all about energy. About energy, and especially the chakra systems too as well. But I think we can do. I think we could probably spend an hour just on that alone. So we're just going to touch on that. We're going to tease you a little bit about that. But yeah, I think it's a brilliant way of also adding that as a diagnostic tool to really see that, because once they really get an understanding of that visualization, when they see what's going on, oh, I have a break here, then it makes it more impactful. Then they can start checking things out. Um,
And to add to that, Michael, if you don't mind, because this is something that I did with furthering in my research, as a result of using this tool and then muscle testing, what I discovered was, and this goes back to the brain, what I discovered was this tremendous interference around the head area.
okay.
And so I would ask my clients, do you experience headaches or migraines or tiredness, fatigue, or just kind of loss of energy, loss of interest, these kinds of conditions, or mood swings, depression, sadness, whatever. And many of them would say, absolutely. Matter of fact, in many, many, many of the cases, they often would share with me that I used to be so vibrant and I could think clearly. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting in front of my computer, and guess what happens? Because
Yeah.
we didn't talk about electromagnetic interference,
Yeah.
which
That's a
is
whole,
another pollutant.
yeah.
Okay. But
Uh,
I classify that in,
okay.
because what I observed and what I also found, around the head area was a tremendous amount of interference. Some of it was electromagnetic, and oftentimes much of it was, but a lot of it came from the chemical compounds that people were inhaling and not knowing, such as even wearing an aftershave lotion or
Yes.
perfume. I'm talking about the fake synthetic perfumes,
Yes. And there's so
okay?
many out there.
Right? Which is used, fragrance alone is used in so many products.
It's crazy
You
how
know,
much it is.
it's yeah, it's mind-boggling.
You must go crazy some days. You just probably walk, it's like, how can this still be happening? Like, I mean, I'm just listening to this, and I know like a fraction of what you know. You must kind of just shake your head and kind of go, I just don't get it some days. Like, I mean,
I agree with you. This has been, for me, when I initiated the research, that was what, 25, 30 years ago. And I guess the question today, has it improved? Did we get better? No. It's
yeah,
gone the other way.
it's gotten worse.
It has gotten worse.
Wow.
It has gotten worse. And that's what's really shocking. But I wanted to mention one thing, coming back to the brain, that particularly fascinated me, and again went into much more research about it, and that was the pineal gland.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. You know, that's been a really interesting topic, you know, because as we're all on this path of enlightenment, as I call it, and it's really important that that little gland gets a little neglected, but now people are starting to realize, you know, there's some importance to this little gland in the brain there. So, well, yeah, touch on that, please.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's the reason my book is called Vibrational Cleaning, because it's not just about getting rid of certain substances, it's about what you can replace and start using in order to also activate and help the pineal gland. So it's a very different way of looking at this. And the reason why I'm stressing this is what I did find, and this was actually the work of Dr. Jennifer Luke, back in England, and what she discovered was that fluoride, this is the use of fluoride, which of course is used in our water and toothpaste and other substances of that nature. And what she discovered was that the pineal gland absorbed the fluorine or the fluoride the most in the body.
Okay.
So what does fluoride do to the pineal? It calcifies it. What does that mean? It hardens it. It should be a very jelly, very soft, okay, liquidy. When that hardens, that's when we see a tremendous amount of problems, from Alzheimer's, dementia, stroke. I mean, it's just wide open.
Yeah. So if you could just explain to the viewers, what the purpose and the function of the pineal gland is, so they really have an understanding of what it really functions and how important it is in the body.
Oh, absolutely. What I also found interesting in the research was at one time, the pineal was considered to be a non-necessary sort of an appendage, if you will. Well, that's not the case. What has been discovered was the opposite, that the pineal is considered to be the head or the most significant in what I call the biocomputer of the brain, where we have the pituitary, hypothalamus, those particular three glands, which really control what's going on in the whole entire body. So the pineal gland was discovered and correctly labeled back in the 13th, 14th century by René Descartes, who said it was the seat of the soul.
Yes, I remember that.
There we go, see? And what's fascinating is that today that in fact has been found to be extremely important in intuition, psychic ability, receiving and being able to process at a very different high level, which we would call the enlightened one, the enlightened state. There's actually been tremendous amount of work that has been discovered about what the pineal secretes. And the secretions alone are extremely helpful for keeping an individual young. We never thought about this, but your pineal is actually one of your youth-keeping glands.
That's interesting.
It is very interesting. It is also considered and found to be the doorway between the fourth dimensional into the other dimensions of what we call the subtle levels of reality.
Yes.
I know we can go off on that.
No, but this is really important, because I mean, I'm all about this and my listeners are all about this too. It's about that educating too, and it's really important. Now, did you find in your studies with the correlation between the calcification of the pineal gland and other, I guess, mental disorders, like, you touched on schizophrenia and stuff like that? Are there other disorders that may be linked to that calcification? Because again, if it's being calcified, nothing can come in or come out. And I mean, it is such an important gland in the brain. And again, that governing part of what it does between the reality of what we're here in our spiritual self. It's that little access, that doorway, which is so important. Did you find any correlation between the research at all with
Absolutely, there is. The malfunctioning or the calcification of the pineal gland has a tremendous amount of what we're seeing with any type of brain disorder. When I say any type, the pineal will be involved, but they did find a very high correlation. They did find a high correlation with children who have been, again, we talked about the issue of toxicity. We do have other forms of toxicity that children are exposed to, and yes, it does hamper and block the pineal gland. The pineal gland is extremely important to produce melatonin. Now, melatonin is also during our wake state, but it is a very important one for also the immune system. We don't tend to think of it that way. So in terms of immunity, The pineal gland is extremely important. Did you know that what they found with the pineal gland, that it was one of the key glands to offset viruses?
No, I did not know that. I mean, I know the thymus gland was really supposed to be important. I've heard that and studies of that, but not the actual pineal gland itself. I mean, I
Pineal
understood
gland
the,
itself.
yeah, I knew the introduction. I mean, well, it was really important with the melatonin, which was really an essential part of the production of the pineal gland. But I always thought it, from my understanding, was more the thymus gland above the heart, the heart center. But it always makes sense when they talk about coherence now between the brain and the heart. Those two things working together to build that immunity, which totally makes sense now.
It does. And since you mentioned that, there is a direct link between the pineal and the heart.
Okay, talk about that for a second.
Now, a matter of fact, and I talk about it in my book, which is I found quite fascinating because there's a gland which actually is what we call the emotional center in the brain, called the amygdala or amygdala. The heart connects directly to that area of the brain, which is our emotional center.
Yes,
The other area that hooks into that area in the brain directly is the pineal.
that's interesting. I didn't know that part.
It is fascinating.
Yeah,
It's fascinating. The the issue becomes, how do we maintain a healthy and clear, right, pineal gland? And again, the research did indicate that what we're seeing is a high incidence of calcification, and that by the time today, this is now in with today's children and teenagers, by the time an individual reaches the age of 17, 40% of their pineal, this is what they have found, has already been calcified of the
that's crazy.
population.
That's crazy. That's a really, that's, I mean, that's staggering, that number there. And I mean, it could only get worse if we don't do something now.
Well, they're even finding 2-year-olds with calcification.
2-year-olds, how is that even
2-year-olds.
possible? Is it just from the ingestion of all the different chemicals? I mean, the
It
pesticides
is
and everything else,
the
or,
exposures. Remember, I talked about chlorine earlier, and then fluoride
yeah, it's in our water system for sure.
and toothpaste.
Yeah, toothpaste. I remember.
Where is tooth?
Oh, I just remember, this is interesting. I remember, I mean, in the 70s when you're in school, what they used to do, they used to have these programs where they give you fluoride, this little drink a cup, and you had the little fluoride every once a month, they give you fluoride to drink. And, it was interesting. I was like, why are we doing this? But that was I don't know if they still do that in schools now, but I just remember as a kid, they just remember sitting in class and this nurse would come around and pour you a little cup and down the hatch.
Oh,
Yeah.
horrible, horrible.
Yeah. It really is. It's a really, it is kind of sad the same ways too, but I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think a lot of it has to do with the education. And once you start educating yourself and empowering yourself, you start making these better choices, and those choices make you become healthier, then just become more aware of what's going on. And then you can start, as you help yourself, you can help others too. You can help your friends, family, which is really another way of doing it.
It
Um,
is. It is. I totally agree. Totally agree. And that's, and I know that that's one of the reasons, certainly why I'm on speaking with you on this show, because it is about educating people. And I applaud you, Michael, for your interest, truly for your interest and wanting to do this and to get this information out to people.
I think it's really, really important. I just, I'm always about helping people, especially just on the just the small levels, and, just helping them at the start. And then once you get that inspiration, that key, that information, that little spark happens. And then all of a sudden you see those magical changes in their life. And that's where I get so happy, because you just like, it's like when you have that, that mother that came back to you after you figured out, it was the chlorine that she was using. Like, I mean, the joy she must have had on her face. And even the child, I mean, the child was probably didn't know what was going on, just know that it was in pain. But I think that's what it's all about. And at the end of the day, that's what we're really meant to do, is help each other out. And those are the sort of things we live for. Like, I love those stories. I
Mhm.
love those little stories like that. That's just amazing.
It is. I totally agree. And there are so many of them with the just making those little adjustments and changes. And it's like, who would have thought? Who would have thought that? And I thought, and in that particular case, she thought she was doing something really wonderful to disinfect, right? And making sure that these clothes are really clean. And in fact, she was doing the opposite. So, and this is happening with so many areas within the home. I mentioned earlier about the toxicity level. And I am going to mention this because I think it's important. Do you know that there are more deaths due to indoor contaminants? This is actually was published by the World Health Organization than anything else. There is a death, one person, that a person who dies from indoor toxicity, this is talking about these pollutants, every 20 seconds.
That's an interesting number too. Now, with that being said, is it directly linked to the actual exposure, or is it because the exposure is actually turning on a genetic predisposition for, like, say, cancer? So so the environment, the exposure of the toxin, ingesting the toxin disrupts the system in the body, triggering some type of illness or disease in the body, causing like a genetic expression. Let's say, again, cancer we've always noticed this as a cancer is because the I didn't say the word.
Carcinogen, yes.
Thank you.
That's okay.
I was going to get it out one of these days.
Yes, you would.
Yeah, about an hour or so, I'd ready to get it out. Show's over. I'm like, well, that's how you pronounce that word. But is that how they look at it, or are they looking at it as just like because they're just ingesting so many chemicals in their body, or they're inhaling them, or just exposed to it? That's what's causing the disease.
Well, they're both are actually at play here. When we're talking about these deaths, again, overall, it's about 1.6 million people that die from indoor pollution every year.
Okay.
Okay, and that's due to like respiratory, asthma, anaphylactic reaction immediately, and of course, the person dies. We have many of these types of deaths. When I was saying one every 20 seconds, unfortunately happens amongst the younger population, children, who get into these chemical compounds and think that they're something to play with and die from it because of the exposure or touching it, and burn. I mean, there was a case of a little boy who mother was busy talking with her neighbor at the door, was distracted, had taken out her cleaning products, left them on the floor, and her toddler went over, and what do you think he did? What do children like to do? Hands and putting it into his mouth. Do you know that child had to be rushed to the hospital because of the damage that was done to his liver? They had to do a liver transplant.
Wow. Yeah, it's shocking at the same time too. It's like, if we didn't have those type of chemicals, it would really never happen. The event would never happen. If there was no chemicals in the house, it'd be a very much safer environment because you wouldn't have to worry about locking up your cupboards, and especially if you have young children. I mean, obviously, you can get sick on anything. That makes sick. I mean, if you have natural products and start ingesting into your body that overloads it, yeah, you can get a toxicity. But the likelihood and the damage of that is going to be a little bit different than if you
Totally.
if you have a bottle of bleach sitting there and the young child just kind of goes, oh, this looks nice, and down the hatch and away you go. So yeah, it's quite shocking. I really hope this is a kind of a reaffirming a reality check. I know a lot of people are aware of it, but sometimes they just need to have that in the back of their brain, because now you can be a little bit more conscientious to it, and you might be going, yeah, I really like what you said there. Okay, let me just kind of reevaluate what's going on in my home and the chemicals, and maybe do a little bit of research, and let me just see what this Dr. Sabina is all about. See what kind of information she's got going on, which I think is fabulous, because I mean, that's what you are. You're an educator. You're a teacher. That's your job. That's what you do. And I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael, on that note too, to make it easy for people, because it is a challenge to think, oh, everything in my house, my toothpaste, my soap, my shampoo, what do I do? Well, I'm just going to finish the story about myself. I had to stop everything because,
Okay.
and I have pictures of what my skin would look like when I stepped out of the shower. And I thought it was the soap. Then I thought it was the shampoo. Then I thought it was a scrub. So then I thought, okay, I won't use any of it. What I discovered was that I was so highly sensitive to the chlorine just from the shower, and my skin would be almost like a third-degree burn. Think of a sunburn all over my body. And
That's
stepping
crazy.
out and thinking, what do I do now? It's not the soap. Okay, it's not what I thought was the shampoo. And I did find that they were irritants as well. But the chlorine, again, coming back to the chlorine water, so of course that led to getting a filter and changing that. And then also, of course, stopping all of those toxic shampoos and soaps, etc., and looking for an alternative.
Okay, so
So,
I just want to just interrupt you there because I just thought of something really kind of cool. So talk about filters just for a second. I don't want this to be a commercial, and I really,
no.
I try to strive away from that. But are there, I wouldn't say a certain brand, but can you find portable filters that you can put on your shower and your tap to get rid of the chlorine?
Yes, I actually was using a company's, and honestly, I don't remember their name right now, but there was a company, there's a couple of the companies in Toronto area or Ontario that do sell these water filters that you just, you change the water faucet, the head part of it, and it will filter the chlorine.
Okay. All right.
Now, of course, there are other answers is to filter the entire water system in the house. That's really the best
The best
situation.
solution, yeah. But for
Right.
people who are living in like apartment buildings, condos, things like
Correct.
that, yeah, like this guy here. So that's why I was kind of asking. It was more about myself. I was
Well,
like,
and that's what I was living in an apartment building at the time when I discovered this. So, and hence the reason why I did look for a shower filter.
yeah, because it was interesting when you talked about the chlorine, like it automatically, and depending on what time of day or something like that, when I turn on the tap, it just automatically, you can smell the chlorine in the water. And I live in an older building too. So the old pipes, everything else. And it's just like, oh my God. And I have to wait until the smell kind of dissipates. And it's like, okay, maybe it was just sitting there. So I just let it dissipate, I should say. But yeah, I'm going to have to do a little more research. Maybe when we talk off air, maybe you can point me in a direction of getting one of those filters to remove all that excess
Oh
chlorine.
gosh, absolutely. The other issue when you were mentioning about, making these changes, I had to make a drastic change. I had no choice.
Yeah.
I would be in either constant reaction or just throw out everything. So I was down to like baking soda, water, and vinegar until I discovered essential oils and how I can mix and match.
Yeah.
And that's in my book. And
Yeah.
and the difference for me was dramatic.
Yeah. And
Okay,
that's
that was really dramatic. Um, but what I suggest for people who are just starting out, just select one area, and I would say the kitchen.
okay. Perfect. I was going to ask you about that. Okay. Let's do
The
that.
kitchen. Why? Because that's where you eat. You get the maximum amount of exposure from, and well, your foods, etc. So I would say your dish soap. Make that change. And if you could just, if people could make just 2 to 3 changes and start that way, and then gravitate to the bathroom where we have the shampoos, the toothpaste, the soaps, and those kinds of items, and then the cosmetics.
Yeah.
And thinking of cosmetics, at one time, this is back then, I thought I was using good products. I was using a particular type of mascara, and I think this is important for people to know. Do you know that I lost all my eyelashes?
No, I did not
Burned
know
them
that.
right off. I can laugh today, but it wasn't funny back then.
Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's really extreme too, as well. Like, I mean, to actually lose your eyelashes from the product and the sensitivity of all that. That's
It-
yeah, I've heard so many horror stories with cosmetics, and it's interesting. You know, our mutual friend Lana and her sister owns that natural skincare product, so I have a chance to be over to their place. So a little shout out to them too as well. But yeah, it's amazing how much with chemicals. Like, I mean, I feel so sorry for you women to put all this stuff makeup on, and it's just laden with chemicals, like with nickel and this and that and all these other crazy stuff that's, you know, heavy metals that you just put on your face just to kind of go through the day. It's incredible.
yes, and it doesn't have to be because there are safe sources today,
Yeah.
but it's sourcing them and knowing where to get them. And that's, of course, I have those answers today.
Yeah, which I think is fabulous. And that being said, Dr. Sabina, we're almost out of time.
Ooh,
Yeah, like it's went by really fast. Actually, we're a little bit over, but that's okay because it's just so it's absolutely been a pleasure to have you on here and really informing people. And that being said, so if people are looking to find you on the World Wide Web, they want to pick up your books and all the great information, where can they find you?
I would advise people to go to my basic website called DeVitaWellnessNow.com.
Okay.
So
And
that's
I'll
my
have
name, DeVitaWellnessNow.com.
Yeah, and I'll have all that information in the description on the podcast too as well. So you can just click the link and get over there and get some more information. So if you're really curious to explore this thing, which I think everybody's going to be going, yeah, I think I need to reevaluate what's underneath my sink in my kitchen and everything else. So that being said, Dr. DeVita, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Michael. Truly, many blessings to you for doing this.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And thank you. And I know your listeners are going to be enjoying this. And that being said, I'm just going to close off the show. This has been the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye for now.